Hi, guys. Welcome to the Art of Catholic podcast. I have a wild and woolly conversion story for you guys today. You do not want to miss this. I am interviewing John Edwards, who is one of the founders of virtual Catholic conferences, and I'm sure you've seen them online. They've gotten huge since COVID hit, and they've had several conferences. In fact, they have another one coming up on January 8th to 10th called Take and Read. It's a scripture conference. And I'm going to be one of the speakers at that. If you want to register for that, it's a totally free conference. There are lots of other speakers there. Pat Madrid, Ralph Martin, Teresa Tomeo, and a whole host of other presenters. And I'm one of them as well. So if you want to register for that conference, you can do so for free. There's a link down below in the description. You can check it all out there. But this is a great story. So stay tuned for it. It's a little bit longer of an episode, but you don't want to miss it. And as always, please subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. Enjoy the story. Welcome to the Art of Catholic. I'm Matthew Leonard. My guest today is John Edwards, and John is the founder and executive director of Pew Ministries, a Catholic apostolate that really seeks to bring people into an encounter with the person of Jesus Christ, and just regular people, not just the high and mighty types. I mean, everyday Catholics. His desire is to bring them into a relationship with the Lord, and he's a Catholic speaker and evangelist. He's also the host of the Just a Guy in the Pew podcast, which you can find at justaguyinthepew.com. He's also the co-founder of the Virtual Catholic Conference ministry, and maybe you've seen the big conferences online that just kind of exploded out of nowhere when COVID hit and all that. John is one of the guys behind that, and they're doing some great stuff. He is a husband and a father, and he lives, you're never going to be able to tell from his accent, but he lives with his family in Memphis, Tennessee. And it is my pleasure to welcome John to the Art of Catholic podcast.
Hey, thank you, Matthew. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Just to kind of set the stage, you and I, first of all, have never met in person, and we've only really been in conversation for, a couple of weeks. I was down in South Carolina a couple of weeks ago doing a parish mission, and a few weeks before that, someone had said to me, you should hear this guy John Edwards' story. And I can't remember who it was now, but and they said, yeah, that guy, because I was talking about getting an invite to do virtual Catholic conference.
Sure.
And I wasn't really all that familiar with you. And they said, no, he's got a really powerful story. And when I was in South Carolina a couple of weeks ago at a speaking engagement, we had the opportunity to speak on the phone. And I was calling you with a question about the conference. And all of a sudden, I got to hear your story. And as I told you on the phone, I'm not typically the crying type, and I cry at sports movies. That's about it,
Don't
But
we all?
I was crying several times during your story, and it was so powerful that I wanted to have you get the opportunity to share it with the people who listen to this podcast. So I'm really grateful that you're here and you're willing to talk about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Matthew. And I mean, I can start in the beginning. I guess that's where you need to start all stories, right? So
yeah, no, please do. And the first thing I just want to say is you're a Catholic now, obviously, but you weren't raised
Sure.
a Catholic, were you? So give us a little bit of the
No,
backstory.
Well, I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. As you said, my accent's probably going to give that away at some point. But yeah, born and raised here in Memphis, Tennessee. I lived here all my life, still live here now. And I was born and raised in the Baptist church. From the time I can remember, my parents had us in church. They were both from Mississippi in a small town, grew up, seventh grade on, dating and married, that kind of fantasy story you don't get to hear much anymore, but it happened in their lives. And they were both raised Baptist. So when they moved to Memphis, they found a church here locally, and we started going there. And I was there every day that the church was open. I mean, I can remember having the same friends at 18 I did at, 5 or 6 years old that just went to that church and worked our way up through all the different Sunday schools and departments and all of that through the Baptist church. And just, man, summers full of mission trips and centrifuge camps and just doing all sort of things like that, running vacation Bible school things. I love the Lord, and I loved anything that involved him as a young man, whether it was going to concerts, Christian concerts, or going to trips like that. But we got to the age of about 18, and here in Memphis, it's sort of a melting pot of people's parents that have gone to all these different SEC schools in the area, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, wherever. So a lot of people, because Memphis is one of the larger cities in the South, they congregate here. So a lot of people's parents were here. They went, they wanted to go where their parents went when it, came time to go to college. So, this community that I'd surrounded myself with, all of a sudden was on the verge of disappearing. Now, I went to an Episcopal school too. It's always funny. I was raised Baptist. I went to an Episcopal school, and now I'm Catholic. So, I only got a few more rounds to make, and then I'll be all through through most of them. But at the Episcopal school, I was a good athlete, played basketball, things like that. And I generally was a popular kid when those sports were going on. But when they weren't, I just, I was always living my life talking about Christ. And at the time, that wasn't a real popular thing, even at a Christian school. A lot of people kind of were talking about other things, and you were sort of the dork, for talking about your faith and the way that you love Christ. So my community was at that church. I mean, that's where all my friends were growing up. So when we reached the age of 18, and people started saying, well, I'm going to Ole Miss, or I'm going to Tennessee, or wherever, I started going, oh no, like, what am I going to do? I have no idea what I want to do in my life. I'd started working at Napa Auto Parts when I was 16 years old. My father worked there 45 years, and he looked at me when I was 16 and said, it's time for you to start doing something. So get a job in the summer, start making some money, and pay for that car note or whatever. So I was doing that, but I wasn't ever one of those guys that knew what I wanted to do with my life. I had friends that said, I want to be a CPA, or I want to be a lawyer or a doctor. And, dang it, if 10 years later they weren't those things. But I was never that
I hate
guy,
those guys,
right?
man.
Yeah. I'm like, why is this so easy for you? But so anyway, we got to the age of 18 and people started to leave. And all of a sudden I was by myself for the first time in my life. So I looked around. I'd always been a University of Memphis fan, basketball, and they were terrible in football. They're pretty good now, but basketball was my thing. So I'd always sort of dreamed I was going to go there and play basketball. That didn't work out. So I said, well, I'll just at least try to go to school there and see if I can figure it out on the way. Didn't know anybody except one guy left in Memphis, and he was in charge of a fraternity. He was the Rush chairman that year. So that first year I walked on campus, and I was surrounded by thousands of people. I mean, thousands of people all around me. But I didn't know who they were. I didn't know any of them. And all of a sudden I was there by myself. So I started going to class. I'm in these rooms, and I'm looking around and seeing all these people that are talking. No one's talking to me. And I'm an outgoing guy. It wasn't like I wasn't trying, but I just wasn't making a lot of headway. Beautiful girls that I would try to, talk to. And they were only talking to guys in those fraternity shirts. So I figured, you know what, I'll call my buddy in the fraternity, see if I can get one of those shirts and get somebody to talk to me. So that's what I did. I called him. I pledged a fraternity, made it in. And, Matthew, that's when I really quit going to church, for 10 years of my life. All of a sudden, I realized that I'd had this identity in the faith and the church, but without that structure, without that community, without that support, it quickly went away. I started to do the things in college that people did to fit in, to be popular, to be cool. Started drinking a whole lot. At this time, I was still working at Napa, and I'd moved myself up. I'd made my way up, was making some good money, a lot more money than a college kid should be making in college. And so people knew that. So all of a sudden, I was the guy that, could pay for gas to go places and pay to get people into clubs and buy all the beer you wanted. And then I could start buying drugs, which eventually worked its way into the rotation, right? People were smoking a lot of weed, and I started with that. And then next thing you know, it was acid, and then ecstasy. There was some pills that, I tried and took. And one night, I made the worst decision of my life. It was a Sunday evening. I'll never forget it. I was over at a buddy's house, and we were watching, NFL or something like that all day, drinking beer and smoking some weed, and I'd had too much, and I was worried about getting home. At that time, there wasn't Uber and all this cool stuff that, we got now, where you could hit a button and somebody will drive you home safely. But I got up to go to the back of the house, go to the restroom, and there was some of my buddies had disappeared a while. And as I went down the hallway, I heard some guys talking, opened the door a little bit, and there was cocaine on this dresser. And I'd never seen cocaine, but it was one of those moments where, like, I flash back to those like NBC after school specials or whatever, where, you have the scene of like, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to be anywhere near this. And, you would think after doing, that would have happened with acid and all that. But for some reason, cocaine was like the thing. You're like, don't ever do that, because you'll never be able to stop. And I had the flashback of like being in the car with my parents and just, Mom, I'll never drink. Mom, I'll never do drugs. Mom, all those promises going out the window. And these guys apparently had been doing this around me, but had never, they knew I didn't do it, so they didn't invite me to do it. This has been going on in the shadows a little bit in the group of friends in my fraternity. So, I start to walk away. They call me back. Hey, man, why don't you try this? And I can't tell you why I did it, but I made the decision to do it. I did a line, and, Matthew, I felt like I could run through a wall. I never felt like anything like that in my life. I was able to drive home that night, and I told myself when I got home, I was still living with my parents at the time. I said, I'll never do that again, right? Like, that's it. Like, I never touch that again. Well, the following Friday, I was at a buddy's house, one of the same guys, and we were hanging out. And all of a sudden, everybody, I guess, was like, well, now he's seen this and he's aware that we do this. So it started to go on right in front of me, in the den on a coffee table, and and I'm going, oh man, like, what am I going to do now? And I gave in again and started doing it. And I'm not trying to blame them. I'm in charge of my own decisions, but for whatever reason, I made those wrong decisions. And so that started to become a big thing in my life. School became less and less of importance to me. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to be. I got a goose egg one semester. My dad said, that's it. I'm not paying for school, so you can just work full time for Napa. So I started doing all of that and hanging out with these same guys. And, we would sit there on a Friday night and do cocaine and say, well, we're going to drink a lot, and then we'll do this. It'll calm us down, bring us down. And then we can go out at 11 o'clock, midnight at night to meet girls and all that stuff and be able to go out and party. Well, then that worked for a while, but then it became, we'd get back from doing that and we'd do cocaine all night. And then it moved from that to where we didn't go out at all anymore. It was just us sitting around doing cocaine. We were all getting more and more addicted to it. And shortly after that, the guys in the fraternity started figuring out that there's this group of guys that are doing this. And so that kind of separated. And then the guys who finally said, enough's enough, they kind of separated. And it was just me and a couple other guys. Well, I was functioning, at a high level at this time of my life. I had moved up to be a salesman in the company of Napa Auto Parts. I was making a lot of money. I was a salesman of the year for a Fortune 250 company, and nobody knew all this was going on in my life. I'd gotten to the point where I was buying the drugs myself. I was doing them, by myself at my apartment, things that I'd always sworn I wouldn't do. I'll do it, but I won't do it by myself. I'll do it, but I won't buy it. I'll do it, but I'll never have the dealer's number. All that stuff crumbled, pretty quickly. And I found myself going to work, performing all day long, putting on the mask and the facades that so many guys in this world try to keep up, right? These appearances. But I was a broken mess inside. And, I didn't have girlfriends for a long time because I just kind of focused on work and partying. And one day in my life, I guess I was about 25, 26 years old. I was really kind of depressed. I hadn't been around any girls. I'd sort of aged around out of the going out, the college age of that stuff. So I was pretty hopeless at the time, right? I was in between apartments. I was back at my parents' house for a minute, and I was just sitting there going, man, like, am I ever going to get married? Am I ever going to be able to stop this stuff I'm doing? And then those voices would come in. Oh, it's not a big deal. No worries. A lot of people do this. You can handle it. Well, one night I went out to a bar. My little sister was in town. She had moved away at college age and came back every once in a while, but it had been several years since she'd lived here. So she came back for a visit, and I took her out to this bar that we used to go to with my buddies on Friday nights, and we'd sit there and play Golden Tee golf, drink some beer, hang out, all that kind of stuff. Well, my sister comes in, and she's hanging out. The guys are there. But for some reason this night, everybody decides they're going home early. And I was disappointed. I'm like, come on, man, it's Friday. We're going to do the stuff we're not supposed to be doing, but then we're also going to have a good time and party and all that. So my little sister winds up leaving, and I'm sitting there. A friend of hers comes in that used to play volleyball with her and says, hey, John, it's good to see you. It's been a long time. I speak to her, and she goes and sits at this table with this girl I knew from college named Angela. And a couple minutes later, the same girl, my sister's friend, comes over and goes, hey, this girl at the table thinks you're cute and wants to talk to you. And I said, okay, that girl, that's Angela. And she used to date one of my best friends in college. Like, what does she want? What does she want to talk to me for? So long story short, she didn't realize who I was. I'd grown a goatee. I'd filled out, in the last couple of years. So she didn't realize that we knew each other. Well, I sit down at this table, we start talking, and we hit it off that night, Matt. And we started dating, and shortly thereafter, about a year later, we get married. And I'm thinking this whole time, all right, my life's getting on track. It's time to stop this cocaine. It's time to stop the nonsense. I'm lucky I haven't been caught in a random drug test, all these things. It's time to grow up, right? As St. Paul says, like to put away childish things and be a man. Well, I just knew these milestones in my life would stop what I was doing, but they didn't. Angela and I, we start talking about getting married. We start making the preparations for that. I was Baptist. She had somewhere in a conversation said the man I'm going to marry is going to be Catholic. So I thought I was the man for the job. So I went to the first RCIA class I could find and signed up and went through that, with just the intention to marry her. In my mind, that was a chivalrous move, right? Like I'm giving up what was my faith for yours and to marry you. And hopefully that means something. But she didn't know really I hadn't been going to church in 10 years either. Right. So, but we wind up deciding to get married. We get married in the church, go through RCIA. My father-in-law was my sponsor. The whole time I'm hiding all of this, we're dating. I'm still doing drugs, hiding it. And so we get married and I'm thinking, okay, it's going to stop. Well, it didn't. I continue to work and more stress piles on with work. We start to talk about children. I'm thinking, okay, this is it. Like, I don't want to take the risk of doing drugs. And while we're trying to have children and something happened to the baby because of what I'm doing. But that didn't stop me either. I kept doing it. Our son Jacob was born 2 years after we were married. He's 11 today, perfectly fine. God blessed us in that regard. But I thought, okay, great, this is it. I wanted to be a dad my whole life, and I got a son the first time out. Like, I can't wait to teach him all these things. And now I got to stop doing cocaine, right? Like, look at this bundle of like happiness. How could I continue to do this? But Matthew, like it had a hold of me at that point. I couldn't get rid of it. I was still doing it, and it didn't stop. It didn't change. All this stress was coming on me. I was now a father. I had to provide. I was 100% commissioned salesperson year over year. After I had to beat my number to continue to make what I made or more. I put so much pressure on myself. Well, about 3 years later, we're down the road. I'm still doing the drugs. In this time, my mother passes away from cancer. My mother was a very holy woman, just loved the church, loved her faith. And she contracted breast cancer. And I remember when she did, it was, 5 years, before the girl, or it was right before, 5 years before Jacob was born. She contracted this and she was like, it's no big deal. I'm going to beat it. Women beat breast cancer all the time. But every year it seemed like it moved somewhere else and moved somewhere else. And at that time of my life, I would go visit them. They retired down to their farm in Mississippi. I'd go visit, but I was always quickly out the door because I didn't want to miss the party or miss whatever was going on. And so I remember my mother one day, I knew she had an appointment here in Memphis at the cancer doctor. And I'd never been to a doctor's appointment with her. My dad always went. But for some reason that day, I said, I'm going to drive over there and meet him and surprise him. So I walked in there and they told me she was in the back and I could go in. Well, I didn't know what was going on. I sat down and my father was sitting there. He said, what are you doing here? And we were kind of catching up. And the doctor comes in and she just looks at us and says, I'm sorry to have to say this, but it has moved, from your lungs and through your other systems. And now it's in your brain and you may have a month or so to live. This is the first time I've ever been to a doctor's appointment with my mother. And sorry, still kind of fresh, but.
No, I understand, man. Take a second. I lost my mom to cancer as well.
Yeah. And, I'm sitting here going, wow, the first time I go to the doctor with my mom, this is what I hear. And I look over at my dad, this mountain of a man that grew up on a farm and, wasn't ever a lot of I love yous or I'm proud of yous. It was always sort of, you should know about what I do for you and the way I live my life and provide for you. And to see this mountain of a man just break down in tears, and I'm going, oh my gosh. Well, I tell Angela I have to call and tell my sisters. And then I start to get angry, right? Like I just start to get mad. Like, God, what's with this, right? That she is such a wonderful woman, such a holy woman. She loves everybody. She puts everybody first, like no matter what. She was always the last to eat, always the last to, she just took care of everybody. And here I am, this guy that I just, why do I exist, right? Like all I do is do drugs and lie and hide things and just, I was struggling with porn and all kind of stuff at that time in my life. I'm like, why does somebody good like that have to die? And you let people like me live? I really, it was just a hard time in my life. And I began to cuss God. I began to curse God. I was like, I'll never, if this is the kind of God you are, then I don't want any part of you, right? Like, I don't I don't want anything to do with you. You're not allowed in my life. I'll never worship you. I'll never love you. I hate you, God. I remember saying those things over and over.
Whoa.
And yeah. And so I just began this hate relationship with God. I quit going to church. The only reason I was really going at the time was to keep my wife off my back. I never really fully embraced the Catholic faith. Didn't really ever understand it. Didn't have the best RCIA class. Wasn't participating in the sacraments other than going up and taking communion, and probably, not rightly so. Definitely not rightly so, not probably. But this was all going on in my life. And, all of a sudden, Angela tells me one day, I've got my son Jacob. He's 3 at the time, or 2, and we're at the Memphis Zoo. I'm just taking him over there trying to do a dad thing because I'm guilty. I feel so guilty for how I'm living my life. And we're at the zoo, and my wife calls and says, "Hey, I had that ultrasound today at her work. She works at a hospital." And she goes, "There's 2 heartbeats." And I said, "Yeah, yours and the baby's." And she goes, "No, that would be 3. We're having twins." And I went, "Oh my gosh, like what am I, do you know how much daycare is going to cost?" That was like my first reaction. And all this is going on now. In the midst of this, Matthew, I'm still doing all these drugs, right? Like I'm doing, I'm buying a 40 bag of cocaine like every day, and not always doing it all, but
How
going
are
every
you doing?
day.
Like, how are you maintaining yourself at this point? I'm sitting here wondering how you're maintaining the facade. It must have been exhausting.
It was, Matthew, and that's what I tell everybody is like it's such a prison cell. It's such a prison cell, like because I lied to everybody and everyone I knew. And it was to the point where I didn't know I couldn't remember what I told anybody. So if somebody would walk up and go, "Hey, John, did you?" And I'm going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What did I say? What did I say? What are they going to ask? What if I don't have the right answer? What if I told them something different last time?" All the time, every conversation I had. But I could sit up, so I would go home, I would play with Jacob, I would cook dinner, but I would drink 5 beers before Angela and Jacob got home. I would do a couple lines of cocaine. I would make dinner and all these things to kind of keep up this facade that I was a good husband and a good father. But then Jacob would go to bed, Angela would go do her thing, and I would, drink 15 beers in a night. I'd smoke a half a pack of cigarettes. I would do, no telling how many lines of cocaine and stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning. And so the girls come, and I'm thinking, "Lord, please don't let this happen, where something happens to them because of what I'm putting in my body." And again, blessed with 2 beautiful red-haired, blue-eyed, identical twin girls, Allison and Caitlin. They're 7, about to be 8 tomorrow. And I'm thinking, now I got to change, right? Now this is it. This is going to be the thing. Like I don't get to mess around anymore. This is the defining moment. Nope. Just continue to do it more and more. I told you when my mother died, it just threw me into a spiral. Like I continued to just say, "You know what? I don't care. I don't care. Like if this is the way God treats people, then I'm just going to live my life the way I want." The only time I ever mourned my mother's death was in the shower. I would get in the shower in the morning, and then we had watched a movie. Gosh, I'm going to remember the name. I forget the name of it, but it's Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, The Bucket List. She wanted to watch that. And then I didn't realize it was about cancer. And, we were in the room watching. I remember this day. But John Mayer had a song in it called Say. And it would say, say what you need to say what you need to say. And it talked about death and dying. So that I would play that song, and I would sit in the shower and just bawl my eyes out. And I would punch the shower wall and just curse God and all those things. And so I was very, obviously, unhappy in my life and broken and lost. I was carrying all this stuff. I didn't really have any friends in my life. I continued to do coke, and a lot of the other guys just said, "You know what? I'm done with this. I got a girlfriend. I got a wife now. Like, time to grow up." Well, that wasn't me. So I lost the friends I had in my life, and I just was alone. Angela wanted to go out places. She wanted to go to dinner. She wanted to go enjoy a date, something like that. But I only wanted my couch and my beer and my drugs. I had a fear now, and as an extrovert, of going out and having to interact with other people in fear that they might find out, or be able to tell something about me that was off. I was doing cocaine everywhere I went. If I was at a ball game or something, I was doing it all the time. So,
So what was the event that when it all came crashing down?
Yeah. One night the girls are born. We're doing that whole thing, taking care of the babies, taking care of Jacob. And work had started to get more stressed, just more stressful all the time. I had a big customer here in Memphis that owned a bunch of tire stores. And they were just people that were difficult, to deal with. Like they were my number one customer. If I lost that account, then everything was gone. Like all my money, the house of cards comes flying, comes crashing down. So there was a couple of nights where I got texts from them late at night where they looked at something wrong and thought that we had jacked up their pricing, and I started getting those, blankety blank blank, you text, and I'm not buying from you ever again. And the stress, man, it threw me into a frenzy because it happened a lot of nights in a row, and so I just started turning it on and doing more and more. This time in my life, Angela had sort of said, "I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know that I want to know. I'm just going to go do my thing." Our marital, like the relations of husband and wife, were few and far between because I was afraid of going back there and not being able to be able to do that with the way the drugs affected your body. So there was this just total breakdown of intimacy all around, not just in a sexual way, but all kind of intimacy. So I'm sitting there this one night, and these texts come in, and it's like 1 in the morning, and I got some baseball game on repeat that I hate baseball, so it's just on in case she walks in the room
Right.
oh, he's doing something. So I finish up with the drugs, I throw the beer out, and I go get in bed. For some reason this night, Matthew, like I can go to sleep pretty quickly. Was not the case. If you've ever done cocaine, hopefully no one listening has, but it's hard to go to sleep. Well, I'm laying there. I go to sleep pretty quickly, and then I'm thrown out of bed in the middle of the night, like, maybe 30 minutes after I fell asleep. Just pop up out of the bed. I'm sitting up. My heart feels like it's going to explode out of my chest. I crawl out of the bed, fall and hit my knees. I kind of look up and make sure that Angela doesn't sit up and go, "What is that? What's that noise?" I crawl into what, was called the master bathroom, but it was like a closet-sized bathroom in my tiny house we had at the time, and I crawl up to the commode, and I can't breathe, Matthew. I'm sitting there just going, what's going to happen? Like, oh no, this is it. I'm going to die. Like all these things you see in these movies with guys that do drugs, like this is it. My heart's going to explode. I'm going to have a heart attack right here. And so I crawl up on this commode. I'm sitting there. I'm just rocking back and forth, and I start to just say, all right, God, like, I'm not a fan of yours, but I don't want my kids to be without a father. I don't want my wife to be without a husband. Like, if you'll just make this stop, I promise I won't do it again. I promise I won't do it again. Well, it just kept happening, kept happening. So I grabbed a towel from the towel rack and threw it over my face and tried to slow my breathing. And I did. I was able to calm my breathing. It slowed down. My heartbeat slowed down. And I got up. I crawled back into bed and went to sleep. Angela never woke up. And I said, I'll never do it again. I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to throw out the drugs. I'm going to quit all this stuff. And I did. Well, 4:30 the next afternoon, I was right back there buying the drugs again. I was back there buying their 12-pack, and I was back at home doing the things that I did. So that very next night, same thing happens. It's late at night. I got some ESPN or something on, repeat, and I get through and I go back to bed and I lay down and go to sleep quickly. Wake up, same thing, panic attack. Heart about to, I was about to blow out of my chest, fall out of the bed, crawl to the bathroom, same exact events. And this time I'm going, all right, like this is 2 strikes. I don't know if I'm going to get another one. God, you know how I feel about you. But if you help me, I know there's a men's conference this weekend that my father-in-law has been wanting me to go to. I'll go to confession. I'll go to that conference. I'll be better. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want my family to lose their father. I remember sitting there saying, when I was worried about Angela, like I really felt like I needed to call an ambulance. But there was a thought in my mind that said I would rather die right here than her find out. I'd rather die right here in this bathroom than her find out what's going on in my life and have to deal with that. Because I knew she would take the children. I would, my life would be a wreck, and she'd have every right to. So, I pray that prayer, and I'm saying, God, I'll go this weekend. I'll do it. I'll make you a deal. I'll be better. So I get up, my heart stops. I go back to bed, and I get up the next day. So I go to this men's conference. I didn't want to go. I was trying to go back on my word, but I just thought, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to get another shot at this. So I went to this men's conference in Memphis that they put together every year. About 1,000 men go. I think Father Mike Schmitz, or no, it was the Crossing the Goal guys were there. They were speaking and a witness speaker. But I went for one reason, to go to confession. And so I did. I did the thing where you walk out and they got, a bunch of priests in the hallway. And I'm walking down the hallway going, nope, I know him. Nope, I know him. Nope, I know him. I'm not going in there. He knows my family, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I find a guy from Batesville, Mississippi, which is a town outside of Memphis of about 40 miles. I said, there's no way that guy's going to know me. So I go in there. It's this kind of crotchety old priest. He looks like he doesn't even really want to be there. And I'm thinking, well, this, I don't know what this is going to wind up like. But I sit down. I don't even know how to go to confession because the only time I've ever been is during RCIA 10 years before. I'm 37 years old now, right? And I don't even know how to practice my own faith that I'm married into. So I go in here and he starts it for me. I go to tell him everything in my life, and I finish with, I just want to stop and I don't want to get in trouble. And he says to me, man, he just lit into me. He says, that's not up to you. And if you really want to be forgiven, you got to be repentant and you need to turn your life around. And if you're not willing to do that, then you just need to get out of here, and all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, buddy, all right. Like, I'm trying to confess, and I didn't expect you to be. Aren't you guys supposed to be loving and like shepherding and compassionate and all that stuff? And he's like, no, you need to figure out what you want in your life. And if it's God, then you need to figure that out right now. And so I'm sobbing. I'm telling him everything. I'm telling him the truth. And he gives me absolution, and I get up and I made the vow right then that I wouldn't do drugs again. I was going to be better in my life. That was that Saturday night. So I go home, I pour out the booze, I throw out the cigarettes, I flush the drugs, and I held my promise together for 4 days. I made it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I got to tell you something, Matthew, it was, for somebody who's never been addicted to anything, when you stop like that, your body, it feels like the worst stomach virus you've ever gotten in your life. Like it feels like that times 10. I can remember I would get up and go to work and I was fine. I would go do the things I needed to do. But 4:30 in the afternoon, when that was usually the time I started kind of shutting down the day and heading towards the house, if I had in my mind, I'm not stopping by my dealer's house, my body would go from feeling completely fine to retching, like literally physically retching. Going like, no, you can't go home. What are you going to do tonight? You don't have any beer. You don't have any drugs. What are you going to do? And just shaking and all this stuff. Like,
do you think that was just physical or demonic as well?
You know what? Looking back at it, probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of addicts, famous people that have really, actors and musicians and stuff that have really been bad into drugs talk about the physical side of it is you telling your body no, and it just freaks out, But I do see where there was some demonic presence in it too. I mean, there had to be. But so I'm starting to head home every night feeling sick. I make it all the way to Thursday. Now this is Holy Thursday. It's Easter week. And I go down to a place in Hernando, Mississippi, a town in Mississippi, about 20 minutes from Memphis. And I've got my oldest customer there who's been looking to renovate his shop. About $200,000 worth of equipment. I'm going to make a ton of money off of it, more money than I made all year long to that point in one sale. And he tells me that day, he gives me a PO, send it, right? I want it, go ahead and bill it. So I call my boss. He's going nuts because it's going to make it his end of the year stuff. I'm going to make a bunch of money, and I'm heading up the interstate. Well, that dealer lived off that interstate between that shop and my house. So I just start all of a sudden in my head, this euphoria goes off. I'm going, man, I'm so happy. I've been working on this a year. I should celebrate. How am I going to celebrate? And then it came like, I'll just get some cocaine. I'll just do a little bit of cocaine tonight. Like, I know I promised God, but it's not a big deal. I'll just do it this once. So I stopped by this guy's house. I actually passed it because he wouldn't answer the phone. I was supposed to be picking up my son, Jacob, from my father-in-law's. And he called me. The drug dealer called back about halfway there. I spun the car around like guys on the Dukes of Hazzard, like just flipped it around, going the other way, and pull back to his house, run in, give him my $40 I normally give him, get back in the car. I look down, I have no gas. Like I've got a digital meter, it's a zero. And I'm going, oh my gosh, as you can imagine, I'm not in a very nice part of town. And so I hang a left, I blow down the street going 60 or so and pull in this gas station, glad to make it. Well, as soon as I start opening the door to get out of here, this whoop, whoop, and there's a police car behind me. It's a DEA unit. It's Tahoe. And there's cops on all sides of the car. They're jerking me out of the car. They throw me up against the back. I had the cocaine in my sock. When I realized I heard that noise, I threw it in my sock. Well, they throw me up against the car. They've been watching this house all day. And where's the drugs? Where's the drugs? And if you don't tell us, we're going to rip this car apart and we're going to find them anyway. So you better tell us now. And I just say, it's in my sock. It's in my sock. I'd never been in trouble before, Matthew. Never been arrested. Never, wasn't a problem kid. And next thing you know, one of the cops is getting mad at me because I don't have gas in my car. I don't have money to give him to put gas in my car. The other ones throw me in the back of a Tahoe. One of them takes off to impound my car, and the other one takes me down to the organized crime unit. They throw me in there. I'm chained by my leg to this bench and by my arm. And next thing you know, these cops that are dressed like clubbing guys, undercover cops come in and just start grilling me. Who's the guy you're buying from, all this stuff? And I'm not saying a word. And then they're telling me, if you don't help us, da, 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 da. So they asked me their questions. I answered what I could. And they promised me, like, you're not going to go to jail. You're just going to, we're going to let you go. Well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. As soon as they left the room, a uniform officer came in, unhandcuffed me from the bench and everything and said, all right, it's time to go. And I'm thinking I'm going home. Well, then he handcuffs me behind my back and he says, we're going to my patrol car. You're going to downtown, the jail in downtown Memphis. Now, Memphis is one of the most violent cities in the country, as far as for crime. So here I am going to this place that I've had guys who've gotten DUIs and friends of mine, things like that in college that had been there. I personally had only been there to check, to get somebody out, bail a guy out one time. But I'd heard stories of how horrible it was. So here I am in the back of this police car. It's now probably 7 o'clock at night. All this transpired at about 4:30 in the afternoon. My wife has no idea where I am. I was supposed to get my son. I never showed up. They have my cell phone. So they pull up and there's this line to drop people off. And the cops are getting angry because they wanted to get off work. Now they got 2 hours in a car with me waiting to get me out. So I'm sitting back there and one of them looks in the mirror and he says, man, what's your deal? You don't look like you've ever been in trouble in your life. I said, I hadn't, man. I never have. I made some mistakes. I started doing drugs in college. I should have quit a long time ago, all of that. And he says, well, man, like, you look really, really worried. And I said, well, yeah, I'm about to go to jail, man. Like, of course I'm worried. It's all I want to do is call my wife and tell her I'm okay. And he says to me, he goes, you know what? We're not going anywhere. I'll get your phone out of the trunk and I'll put it to your ear. I can't get you out of the car. I can't unhandcuff you, but I'll dial the number and put it to your ear if you really want to speak to her. Now I remember saying, well, I do, but I'm afraid of what she's going to say. And Matthew, I still think about this to this day. This cop looks in the rearview mirror. I can see his eyes from the back seat and he goes, well, are you worried about her or are you worried about you? And the thing was, Matthew, in my life, I had been worried about myself for so long, how much money I made, the stuff I bought and put around me, the what people thought of me, all of that stuff. It was always about what I wanted when I wanted it. I was a selfish jerk of a husband. I was a selfish father. I was only a good father or husband when I wanted to be, which wasn't very often. I just fell into traps that a lot of men are in. So he gets my phone and he puts it to my ear and he calls and she answers. And, oh my gosh, where are you, John? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I just said, Angela, I'm fine. I'm in the back of a police car. I'm in downtown Memphis. I've been arrested. And she says, for what? And I said, Angela, I've been arrested for the possession of cocaine. And at that point, she just said, John, I knew it. I knew something was going on with you. She knew that some of the guys I ran with in college had done this. She probably assumed that we had grown out of it or stopped or whatever, but she had her suspicions. And she just said, I hate you. I hope you go to hell and I never want to see you again. Like, I don't care. You can rot in that jail. And all I wanted was just to let her know I was all right. I wasn't expecting it's okay or anything like that. I was fine with her response at that time. I just wanted her to know that I was alive and I was okay. So he hangs up the phone. He gets in the car. He drives me up to the place. They take me out, take me in there, assign in my stuff. They take your belt and your possessions, like your keys and stuff, throw them back there. And then they release me into this room with all these guys. Some of them are in there for violent stuff. Some of them are DUIs. And I sit in there from about 7:30 in the evening until about 4 in the morning. This whole time I think I'm getting out of this, right? I'm a salesman. I'm really good at what I do. I get out of things. I can talk my way out of everything. Well, they take me over. I get the mugshot, like Law and Order, right? Over there, sideways, forwards. And I'm still thinking, oh, this is nothing. I'll get out of it. 4 in the morning comes around. They call me into these people that deal with the law, with the courts and stuff and tell you, your bail is going to be set in a couple of days or tomorrow, maybe. You're not getting out of here until that's done. And then you've got a court appearance on this date. So that's when it started to hit me. It was real. And then they take me back to this other room and they start saying, okay, here's your bag of stuff, toilet paper, blankets, toothbrush, scrubs. They even had Crocs in there, like size 16 Crocs. I can't find shoes in a store that fit my size 16 feet, but they had shoes in jail. So I don't recommend you want shoes that bad to go to jail to get them. But it just blew my mind. Like I'm sitting there at 4 in the morning going, wow, this is weird. But I call Angela. There's one more chance for a phone call. I call her and she says, John, I know where you are. And I don't care. I've got to get up in a couple of hours and get the kids to school and do everything by myself because you're not here. So again, I hang up the phone. They line us up. And this is when it really got real, Matthew. Like all of a sudden you're walking around this corner and there's cell blocks, A, B, C, D, and then hallways of just jail cells. So they take us down there. I'm the last one. I go down and they tell you to stand in front of this jail cell and these wrought iron bars and doors. All of a sudden they start to slowly open and there's these, bunk beds that are disgusting. The mattresses have stains all over them. God knows what's on them. There's a 6x6 cell, stainless toilet, all that deal. And they say inmates walk in. I do. I walk in there. I turn around. and that door starts to move just slowly, boom, 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 and then that lock that hits the wall, that lock clicks, and I start to realize like this is it, my life's over. I'm going to lose everything. I don't know what's going to happen in my life from this point. I can't go anywhere. I'm no longer in control of my life. And it was so much. I hadn't slept in 24 hours. I was in the same clothes. I hadn't eaten. I was exhausted. And so I just looked over. They gave me 2 blankets. I threw one on the bottom bunk bed, laid down on it. I grabbed the other one, pulled it over my head, and by the grace of God, passed out. Just passed out. The next morning, I wake up and I'm still laying on my stomach, which I never do. I always sleep on my side. It was weird, but I woke up and when I pulled the covers back, it was still dark because I was under the covers. And I thought, oh, good, it's a nightmare. Thank God. I will never do this again. God, thank you for your blessing of giving me this image and this vision in my mind. I'll never do this again. Well, I sit up, and that's when my head hit the top of the bottom of steel bunk bed, Matthew.
Mm.
Like, I sat up, and all of a sudden the covers fell off my head, and I looked around, and there's these yellow cinder block walls they're about this far from my face. And I just threw my legs over the side. Like, no, 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 no. Like, this isn't happening. This isn't happening. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my wife. I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to lose my job, everything. Everybody's going to know. Everybody's going to know. Everybody's going to know. I mean, it was like being in that bathroom again. My heart was going to explode out of my chest. I was crying. I was trying not to cry because people could see me in the jail. Like, just this mix of emotions. And I'm rocking 9-0, just freaking out and thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? There's moments of suicidal thoughts. I started to look around to see if there's something I could take my life with in the jail cell because I just didn't want to deal with what I would have to deal with. And all of a sudden, as I'm rocking just as fast as my body will let me, I stop. Like in the middle of that, like back to my regular upright position, it just stops. And this peace comes over me. And I don't know why, I can't explain it to this day. I just, all of a sudden, these words came out of my mouth, and they're the truest words I've ever said in my life. And it was, at least now I don't have to lie anymore. You know, at least now everybody will know who I am. And in that moment, Matthew, I began to realize like how much of my life was a lie. Like how much hurt I'd caused my wife and my children, and just how my whole life was about nothing but me. And how I'd done everything in my life I could to hide everything and to make it only about me, and how I'd lost every bit of my faith. And I started to see every bit of that. And I just started saying, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to do. I can't help myself. Look at where I've gotten myself. Look at what's happened in my life. I can't do anything. I need you in my life. I'm so sorry for the things I said. I'm sorry for saying I hated you. I'm sorry for saying I'd never worship you again. God, all I want to do is stay with my family. I don't care if I lose my job. I don't care what else happens, but I want an opportunity to be the man I should have been all my life. And, you know, Matthew, I started to look back over everything that had happened. You know, where I thought God had abandoned me, you know, with my mother and all these things. I started to look at my life in these different places and see different ways where God was always there, always trying to help me, always trying to look out for me. And in that moment, I look back now, and it was almost like he had his arm around me saying, John, like, it's okay. That's what you needed me to be, right? That's what you needed me to be in your life. I was that for you. I was willing to take that for you. You know, but now I need you, and I need you to be the man that I created you to be. I need you to be the man that I always hoped you would be, the man you were when you were younger. And I remember just thinking through all that, and I, all of a sudden I said, you know what? I can't control anything, right? I can't control whether I'm gonna keep my job, my wife, my kids, any of that. All I can control is right now in this moment. So I started to have those conversations with God, and I prayed, and we talked about everything that had happened in the last 15 years of my life, or 10 years of my life. And about that time, a bailiff comes, the door opens, and I'm kind of looking out like, was that supposed to happen? What's going on? And a bailiff comes down, and she says, all right, you and you get to go make a phone call and take a shower if you want. Well, you know, I've seen a lot of prison movies, and I wasn't really interested in the shower. So I was like, I'm going to go try the phone call. You know, sorry if that's in bad taste, but it's just the truth. So I walk over to this device they call a phone, and it's a box on the wall with no headset. And so here I am thinking, they said, you got 30 minutes to do whatever it is. You can do both or whatever you can get in this time limit. So I go up this box, and it's right beside a cell. And there's this guy in there that's a mean looking dude that's sitting about 3 feet from this phone. It's loud in there. People are screaming and yelling. You can't hear anything. And all it is these speaker holes, no headset, and numbers. No one tells you how to dial out. And so I'm sitting there frantically trying to figure out how to do it, putting my ear to the thing. I can't hear anything, in hopelessness, right? Like, this is my one opportunity to get in touch with somebody and get out of here. And I can't hear a lick. I don't know if what I'm doing is working. I go to the bailiff. We're not allowed to help you figure it out. So I go back over there and I literally start to cry. I'm like, I'm never getting out of here because I can't use this device. All of a sudden, this thing comes out into my peripheral, vision. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what is that? I'm in jail. Is that somebody trying to stab me? Or like, what is it? And it's this toilet paper roll, empty toilet paper roll. And it's this guy who I looked at as like this scary guy. And he hands it to me. He says, hey man, put this to your ear and put it to the speaker and you'll be able to hear.
Wow.
And I look over and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. And I dial out, I call everybody I know, Matthew, in my life, everyone, all these fraternity brothers for life, all the people I spent, gosh knows how much money on in college. Nobody would answer. Nothing but answer machines. I'm frantically dialing everybody. My wife won't answer. My dad won't answer. My sister won't answer. And it's the loneliest I've ever felt in my life. Well, I call again to my dad's farm and my sister answers and she says, John, we know where you are. Angela's downtown. She's across from the jail right now trying to bail you out. And if she gets it done, you'll be out tonight, but you can't come home. We're going to have to, Dad, or she said, I'm going to come get you from the jail. We'll go by your house, get closed, and you're going to have to stay down here until your court Monday morning. At that point, I didn't care. All I wanted to hear was like, I want to get out of here. Like, just get me out of this place. So I get off the phone. I go take a shower because they told me they were single cell stuff and it was cool. So I went in there and took a shower. I came out and I go back to my cell and I'm sitting there and I'm kind of concentrating on, all right, like, I'm going to get out now. What's next? Well, here comes the bailiff again. She says, your mother-in-law and she says, you have a visitor here. So I go out, I go into this visitor's room. It's just like you see on TV, the glass, the phones. I sit down, there's my wife and my mother-in-law. They're both in tears. I'm crying. And I sit down. I don't even know what to say, right? I'm just kind of like a child that's broken something in the house and you're standing in front of your parents with your head down. And my wife just says, look, I'm so mad at you right now. Like I'm so hurt. I'm mad. I can't stand even to really look at you right now. But I want you to know I'm not going to divorce you. And it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the vows I made to God and the church.
Wow.
And yeah. And then my wife's just saying, you'll hear some more of it in just a second. But she, at that time, I was just kind of like, great, you're not going to divorce me. That's all I heard in that comment, right? Like, you're not going to divorce me. She gets up, leaves. My mother-in-law looks at me and says, John, we're going to get you some help, and everything's going to be okay, I hope. So she leaves. I go back to my cell. It's about 5 hours later, about 9:30 at night. They call me to get out. They said, you're going to be bailed out tonight. They take me in a room. I get my cell phone. I look down. I got 8 billion calls. My boss has called like 15 times, which told me, great, they found out. And it turned out somebody saw a Just Busted magazine or something here in Memphis with my picture in it and told people at work, and everybody knew, my customers and all of that. So I'm getting out of jail. I see that. I walk outside, and it's not my sister. It's my father. Hmm. And, my father, like I said, was this guy raised on a farm, 6 brothers and sisters, just not a lot of it. My dad would tell you they were almost farmhands in a way, there wasn't a lot of I love yous and I'm proud of yous and all that stuff. So my dad was never a big hugger. He never was any of those things. He, I don't think he told me he was proud of me until I was 18 years old. And I basically forced it out of him. I love my father. He's a great man and he loved me. It just was hard for him because he wasn't shown that in his own life. But here I come to this car and he's standing there. And I'm like this little boy again, right? Like, oh gosh, here's my father, and what's the punishment going to be? And I'm so ashamed. And here I am, a 6'8" guy, right? I mean, I'm way bigger than my dad now, and way younger, but I'm still afraid, right, of what's going to happen. And he looks at me and he says, John, are you all right? And I said, yes, sir. And I looked up, and he was smiling, and he said, I love you, son. And he grabbed me, and he pulled me into his chest, and he hugged me. Which I would have died for as a kid, and that it was happening this time. Looking back at it, it was almost like God the Father saying, like, I don't care what you've done. I just want you to come home, And so we get in the car. He takes me by my house. I get my clothes. I'm hoping my wife and kids are there, but they're not. My kids had not seen me in 3 or 4 days at this point. And I go in, I get my clothes, we go to my dad's farm. It's about an hour and a half drive. It's the realest conversation I ever had in my life with him. We start to talk about my mother and my mother's death and things that we hadn't talked about. And, I'll never forget, he looked over and he said, "Son, is there something I did to cause this?" As he said, was I not a good father? Was I too hard on you? Did I not love you enough? And that was as crushing as going to jail and the things that went on. I mean, just to think that my father thought that this was his fault. So I was like, "No, Dad, you're a great dad, right? We all have our faults, but you were a great dad. This isn't your fault. I'm a grown man. I made my own decisions. This is not your fault." And so we get down to the farm, and I stay there through the weekend. It's Saturday morning. I've got some relatives down there, and they're all kind of going, "Where's your family?" And I just said, "Look, my wife's got that big Italian family. We're always up there every Easter. I just kind of said this year, we're going to go down here. I'm going to go down to my place and be with my family." I didn't want to lie anymore. I promised God in that jail cell I wouldn't, but I didn't want to give my 80-year-old aunt a heart attack either. So I just kind of white lied that one. And the next day was Easter Sunday. I went to jail on Holy Thursday, came out on Good Friday, and Saturday I'm sitting there, and Sunday's Easter Sunday. So I wake up Sunday morning for the first time in my life in 10 years. I want to go to Mass. Like I of my own volition, want to go to Mass. And I look at my dad. I say, "Can I borrow your car? I just want to go into town." My dad lives in a town of 600 people. There's a Catholic room. There's not a building. There's a room in a building that's a Catholic room. They have a traveling priest that goes to 5 or 6 towns, and usually he's not there. It's a sister that has communion services. So Angela and I had been there one time 5 years before on Christmas, and so we're sitting. I get in my dad's car. I drive into town, and I pull up at 11 when Mass normally is, and there's no one there. And Matthew, I just start to beat the steering wheel. And I'm like, "Come on, God, for real. Like, all I want to do is go to Mass. I want to reconcile with you. I just want to be in your presence. Like, I want to start this deal we've made off like right now." And I start to beat on the steering wheel and just get mad. All of a sudden, this Jeep comes pulling in, and this sister gets out of it, and she's looking over, and I'm sitting there beating the steering wheel, and she's like, "What's the matter with you?" "I just want to go to Mass," And she's probably like, "What's the matter with this guy?" Man, more people had that kind of excitement about Mass. But she says, "Well, John, she didn't say John, but she said, young man, there's plenty of people down the road. There's too many people here. It's Easter Sunday. We're down at the 4-H club, the agricultural building in the town over. Do you know where that is?" I said, yeah, I know exactly where that is. We'd had some family reunions there." So I get in the car, I rip down there, I go in, and there's all these people, and immediately it sets in on me that like my family's not here, and there's all these families, and it's just hard. I go in, I sit down, and this priest walks up. He processes in, and I'm like, "That's the same priest that was at that Christmas Mass, 5 years ago." So I sit down. He does this beautiful homily. There was a lot of Hispanic people there, a lot of people down there of all different races. But he did the homily in English and Spanish, and it was beautiful. Like just every part of the Mass was beautiful. And so I get up, and I've just got this conviction now. Like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to go be the man that I'm supposed to be. And I get up to leave. They're having a potluck. I don't want to stay around all the families. It's just too hard. So I'm heading for the door. I get to the door, put my hand on it, and I start to open it. And this priest just all of a sudden his hand hits my shoulder, and I turn around. It's this priest, and he says, "Hello, John." And it just caught me off guard. I was like, how do you know my name? He remembered me from meeting me one time 5 years before. Wow. And he says, "I don't know why you're here by yourself or where your family is, but God wants me to tell you that everything's going to be all right." And Matthew, I got to tell you, like it rocked me. Like, how could you know? How could you? I said, "Father, you don't know." And he goes, "John, have a merry." He said, have a happy Easter, and tell your family I said hello." And he just walks off. And I get in my dad's car, and I'm just on fire. I'm like, "That's it. Like, I am never going to screw up my life again. I'm going to win my family back. I'm going to be the man that God calls me to be." I go back to my dad's. That night, I realized I had court the next day, and we didn't get a suit, So my dad and I drive back to Memphis. I call my wife. And she says, "Yeah, you can come by the house. I'm going to be in a room with the door shut. You can come in. Your daughters are asking if you're alive. They haven't seen you." And my 3-year-old daughter said, "Is Daddy alive?" So I go in the back. I get to my house. We had a den on the back of the house where we all congregated and had our family time together. And so I go to that door, and I'm looking in, and I see them on the floor watching Barney or something. And they're all just like, the beauty of that moment, and how many times I'd walk through that den or blown that off, or And I was like, I will never do that again. Like, to just be in the floor with them right now. I open the door, they tackle me. I mean, I'm crying, they're crying. It's just this moment of, you know, being home, but then I got to leave right again, right? Like, I got to leave right again because my wife's like, you got to go. So I get my suit, I get back in the car, I go back to my dad's. The next morning, we come back to Memphis. Um, I have court first thing in the morning. My father-in-law had procured me a lawyer, somebody he went to church with at his Catholic church in Germantown. We go down there. He tells me what's going to go on. I go in the court. I pled guilty, and they had a judge here that had started a drug court, and you can go on a thing called diversion, where you basically pay for drug testing every month. It's sort of like having a parole officer. If you pass every month in a year's time, you can get it removed from your record. Instead of sending just repeat offenders all the time back to jail, trying to actually help them. So I signed up for that. And then right after that, I said, you got to take me to work. I have a work meeting that my bosses told me when they found out, you know, that I had to come meet with them. So I go in, and they've got all these people, these HR people in from headquarters. There's like 20 bosses in different ways of me at my work sitting there. And at this time, Matthew, I'd made my mind up that I was going to check myself in a behavioral science center. The court didn't mandate it, but I wanted to prove to my wife that I was serious about being rid of this stuff. So I go in this meeting, which in my eyes is sort of in my way, you know, like keeping me from that. And they're all peppering me with questions like, did you do it at work? Did you, you know, have you ever done it at a customer's place? And just one after another. And I'm going, no, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And they say, do you not want your job? Do you not care about your job? And I just looked at them. I said, look, I've been here 23 years. I've never been in trouble. I've never been written up. I'm a good employee. I messed up. But the most important thing to me right now in my life is getting my family back. And I want to get to that. I'm about to go check myself into a rehab center, and I really want to get to that. And so they said, all right, well, we're going to deliberate. And then, you know, you're off work until after the court date in a month. You can't tell your customers. You can't call anybody. No contact with anybody. I said, okay, whatever. Let me just get in the car. And my dad drove me down to the behavioral science center. And we walk in there, and Matthew, I've never seen anything like that in my life. You know, this place I went to, I actually grew up watching like the Three Stooges on TV, and this commercial would come on for this place. And I think, man, I hope I never have to go there. Here I was in this place. And my dad starts to go in, and I'm seeing the people that are being brought in, and I just begged him. I'm like, Dad, please don't go in here. Please don't go in here. I can handle this. Just stay in the car. And then depending on if they tell me I got to check in here or I'm an outpatient or whatever, they'll let you know. I'll let you know, whatever. So he decided to stay in the outer waiting room. Well, they took me to a second waiting room, and I sit down in there, and I'm right beside this door that's coming in, and where people are being brought in. It's over my right shoulder, and one after the next are worse than the first, Matthew. It's just family members that have their son or their brother or their daughter by their, you know, the collar of their shirt and their shorts, and just throwing them in the floor and saying, take him, I'm done. Like, I'm done. He's a heroin addict. He's a meth head. Guys are sitting there scraping their skin because they think they've got bugs and insects on them. And their family's just saying, this is the 12th time, I'm done. He's yours. Take him. And so I'm sitting there watching this, and I can't take it anymore. I grab a paper, and there's a newspaper sitting beside me, and I just pull it up to cover my eyes. One after another, people keep coming in, same story. Then all of a sudden the door opens one time, and nobody walks by. The paper doesn't billow or move. And I close it, and it's my wife. I look up, it's my wife. Now, we had not talked since I saw her in front of that glass in the jail cell and when she came to visit me. I look up and I say, Angela, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? And she said, John, I'm mad as hell at you, but I can't let you go through this alone. Sorry. And that's when God showed me what true love really looks like what love looks like, you know, suffering, joy, all of it. Like, love remains the same. And my wife showed up, and I was so awed of that. I was so humbled of that, by that. And we sit down, and she just says, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with us. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get over this, but I want to make sure you get the help you're supposed to. And so they called us back. This lady assesses me, you know, and she says, look, I think you need 30-day outpatient. Now, my wife wanted her to put me like in some hidden room below the building and keep me there for 8 months or whatever until this was, you know, exercised or whatever. But the lady said, ma'am, I'm a professional, and this is what I think you need. So I'm walking out to the car, expecting to go home with my dad for however many days. I'm going to go to inpatient therapy, starting at 10 o'clock every day for the next 30 days. And I'm sitting there wondering as I'm walking to the car, like, man, my dad lives 2 hours away, and now he's going to have to drive 4 hours every day, or at least stay up here, kill time all day to take me back and forth. Maybe I should look at getting a hotel room or whatever. Well, my wife walks up and she says, John, I'm not going to make your dad do that. You can come home tonight. The kids miss you. They need you. I need you to take them to school. I can't do all this by myself. This doesn't make things okay. I'm not happy with you. I'm hurt. I'm not going to sleep in the same bed with you, but you're allowed to come home. And all I heard, Matthew, was you're allowed to come home.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's all I heard. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you. So I get in the car with my wife and we have a little conversation. We get home. My kids just tackle me again. And I'm like, Daddy's here. They had told him I was sick, and I said, I'm here. I'm better. I'm home. I'm going to be better. And we have this reunion that night, and then it gets time to go to bed. And I go back to my room. It's my bed. It's air conditioning. It's TVs. It's, food that's not cornbread and slop, and so I have this excitement of, man, I'm free again. But I look over in this bed that I'm laying in, and my wife's not there. It's this empty spot next to me. And I look across the hallway, and at the time, Jacob's bed was directly across from mine. I could see his bed, and my wife was in there sleeping with him. And I could see her figure. She doesn't like when I say lump, but so her figure under in the bed on the other side of the hallway. And all of a sudden, all that joy kind of went off my face. It just disappeared, the smile and everything. And I thought, I can't just stop doing drugs. I can't just stop drinking and doing the other things I was doing. I've got to be different. I've got to be better. This can't stay this way. And so I frantically started looking for a Bible, and I started looking on my side of the room, which was a mistake. I should have been looking on her side because she probably had 20 in her bedside table, but because she's a devout Catholic, as you can tell by what I've said. But I opened the drawer to my bedside table, and I find this book right here, Father Larry's Be a Man. He actually signed it for me in here too. But like 5 years before, my father-in-law had browbeat me into going to a men's conference before all that happened in my life. And I went, and this guy got up, Father Larry, and I'm thinking this is going to be horrible. And he hit me right between the eyes. And I thought I was going to change my life at that time. He gave me this book when I met him, and he said, read this and be a better man. Well, when I opened the book that night, when I came home, I found the first 3 or 4 pages underlined, and that's where I'd stopped. So that night I picked that book up and I read it cover to cover. My wife got out of bed and came out of Jacob's room the next morning. It was like 5:45 or 6. And she said, what are you doing up? And I said, Angela, I never went to bed. I just finished this book, and I'm going to change my life. I'm going to be a man. I'm going to be the man that you deserve, and the kids. And, she wasn't in a frame of mind to receive that. I'd hurt her tremendously. But I made up my mind right then and there. I'm going to change my life. And so I started picking up the scriptures again. And all of a sudden, Matthew, like my Baptist roots started coming out. When I was reading the Bible, I started going, I know that passage. I know this. Like, this is familiar. And I could finish the words before I ever read the verse. I finished the verse. I read the Bible 4 times by the time I was 15 years old in the Baptist church. And so I start to get involved at my kids' school. I start to coach their sports. I start to get involved in the men's club and fundraising arm of the church. And I make friends, but I never tell anybody what happened in my life. I'm afraid to. What are they going to do? I'm going to lose everything. My kids are going to be kicked out of this school. All these thoughts that were in my head. Angela would ask me all the time, these guys you're running around with, do they know? Nope, not going to know, not going to tell them. So a month had gone by since I got out, and I'm reading the Bible and I'm doing all these things. I'm driving my father-in-law's Suburban to these outpatient meetings, and dropping my kids off at school. Well, it's getting close to when I've got to go back to court. And so a lot of customers have found out at this time, and they're starting to text me, and they're starting to say, hey, I'm hearing things. You better answer me. You better call me back. You piece of this. Da 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 da. And I'm sitting there. I just dropped my kids off at school. It's about 8:05 in the morning in my father-in-law's Suburban, and I'm just going, my life's never going to be right again. Like all these people are going to know. What am I going to do when I have to go back? How am I going to face this? These people I've worked with for 20 years that never knew who I truly was. All of that was weighing on me. And I just was crying. I began to cry and just sit there and go, God, what am I going to do in my life? Nothing's ever going to be better. And all of a sudden I see the pastor of my church walk from his rectory over to the church. All I wanted to do was hide from the world. I was like, I don't want to deal with this right now. I can't tell anybody anything. If I do, I have to lie, and I don't want to do that. So I knew no one would ever look for me in daily mass. I knew where he was going. He was going to mass. So I get out of the car, I walk around, I go in the side of the church. And Matthew, when I grab the handle of that door of that church, you talk about feeling like a hypocrite, right? Everything I'd ever said to God came rushing back. What are you doing going in there? You hypocrite. God doesn't like you any more than you ever liked him, that kind of stuff. And I open the door anyway. I go in the church. I sit on the Joseph side of the church. There's all these people there. There's like 10, 15 people there that are older, probably in their 70s, 80s, retired people. And here comes this 6'8", 37-year-old guy, and they're all kind of looking like, who's he and why is he here? And I go kneel on the Joseph side. And I'm just, I never really paid attention in mass. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared to death that I'm not going to know the responses. And everyone in here is going to know I don't know, because you can hear a pin drop. So I'm kneeling, I'm praying to myself. I get up, and here they come processing in. And the pastor gets up, and he reads the readings, and the readings start speaking to me. I'm like, man, that is weird. They're talking directly how I feel in my life and exactly where I am. Then he gives a homily, and he's like looking at me the whole time. And the only relationship me and this guy have is that he baptized my kids, and he came over to my house for an hour one time. Like, that's the extent of our friendship. And so he starts to give this homily. And Matthew, it spoke right into my heart. Like, I was in tears. I started crying in the readings. I was bawling during the homily. Then he moves into the liturgy of the Eucharist, and he starts to do all of that. And I'm just sitting there bawling, like openly disturbing the church and not able to control myself. And I'm too afraid to move, to get up, to leave. So he gets through with the consecration. He comes down, and it's time for communion. I'm the first on the Joseph side. And he looks at me, and I'm looking up at him, and he waves me forward. And I said, no. Like, I just nodded my head, and he looked at me again, and he said, come. And I got up, and I walked up there, and I put my hands out. I remember just shaking, and feeling so unworthy. And he put the host in my hand, and I took it, and something just came over me. I just felt this warmth all over my body. I felt like there was just this gigantic hug I was receiving from somewhere. And I start to turn to walk back to the pew, and he says something to me along the lines of the blood. And so I walk over and I receive it. Same thing again. I go back to the pew, and I'm just overwhelmed. Like, I kneel, and I am just bawling, ugly crying, snot, just stuff happening everywhere. And I don't even realize that mass is over. Like, I never stop praying. I never get up. I'm sitting there sobbing and praying, half out loud and half quiet. And next thing you know, I look up, and I feel a hand on my shoulder, and it's another priest. It's his pastor. And he touches my shoulder. I look up at him, and I said, yeah. And he goes, John, what are you doing here? Which was a valid question, right? I was not a guy you would find at a daily mass. And I couldn't speak. And he said, come with me. And he took me back towards the confessional. And when I realized that, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to go in there. Last time I went one of those, I went to jail. Like, I'm not sure that this is the way I want to go. So I walk in there with him. I tell him everything, and I start to get up. And the great thing about this is he's now one of my best friends in my life. His name's Father Martel. He's at my house every weekend. He was the light I needed in my life. He was the spiritual director and the spiritual father I needed. At the time, I didn't know that. He was just taking me through confession. And every time I would try to beat myself, he goes, nope, we're done with that. We're done with that. We're not talking about that anymore. God's going to forgive that in a minute. We're going to forgive that. So we get through the confession. He gives me absolution. I said, thank you, Father. And I start to leave. And he grabs me by the arm. He goes, no, where are you going? I said, well, this is usually the part when you're supposed to leave, right? I've only done this twice or 3 times now, but as I understand it, I'm supposed to go now. And he says, sit down. We're not done. And I said, okay. And I sat down, and he said, all right, John, so as I understand it, you're going to this outpatient thing that doesn't start till 10. You got to drop your kids off at 8 every morning. We just happen to have 8:15 mass every day. So you're going to start coming to 8:15 mass every day. And did you notice how I didn't have anybody reading the readings today? Yep. Well, I don't have anybody reading the readings hardly any day. So that's called lecturing. And you're about to find out how to do that as soon as we walk out of here. And you're going to start doing that tomorrow. And he said, and by the way, the last thing is, you're going to come to confession. I don't care what day you do it, but you're going to come to confession to me once a week. If you don't come to me, I'm going to come to you. And he said, and then we'll check the frequency on it as we get further along. And I just said, okay, I didn't, what were you going to say? And so I started doing that in my life every day. And Matthew, daily mass changed my life, like receiving the Eucharist every day, receiving that strength from Christ, having that spiritual guidance. I started to go home, and Matthew, every night I would play with the kids. I would do the things I was supposed to do. I would work on reconciling with my wife. My wife was very hurt. There was a lot of times where I was hurt by things she said to me. You'll never change, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I had to come at some point to the realization that I put her in that situation. I showed her that. I showed myself to be that to her. And so it was going to take a lot of time to show her something different. So I couldn't be angry at her. So I put my focus on there's one opinion in my life that matters right now. And the only one that I can really deal with is God's. So I would be the best father I could to my kids and the best husband that she would allow me to be to her. And then I would come back to my room at 8 o'clock every night, or 7:30 or 8, and I would pray. So my children would find me praying. And I would get a Bible out and the catechism and a crucifix, this very one right here. And I would sit it in the floor and I would just pray. And I'd say, Lord, make me a better man. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, but show me something and let me learn from it. And so this goes on for about a year, making all these friends, like I said before, and doing all these things. Well, that same men's conference rolls around a year later. And this time I'm ready for it, right? Like the first time ever, I'm ready to go to this thing. I'm ready to receive. I'm ready to take part. We head in, Father Mike Schmitz is speaking, and then there's a witness speaker that's a focus missionary. And he gets up and he begins to speak about how he was on drugs. He was had DUIs in his life. And it just, the courage this young man showed to get up in front of 1,000 men and share this just blew me away. I found him after his talk. I told him that. Father Mike Schmitz, I'm sure, did something awesome because he's amazing. But it was that kid's talk that I was focused on. And we're friends to this day still. But I talked to him, and then that night, there was a fundraiser at our parish. It was a 3-point shootout. And that same pastor, said, you got to come to this. You were a basketball player. Come and support it. So I did. I brought my son up there. Well, it turned out there were some other men from my parish that went to that conference that day. And one of them in particular was running around. Man, the Holy Spirit had bid him that day. He had been to confession for the first time in 20 years, and he was running around telling everybody everything he confessed. Like some things, I was like, hey, man, ixnay on the, like you need to call. There's women and children in here. You need to quiet down. And he comes up and he's like, John, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Why am I feeling this way? So, Jay, you've had an experience with the Holy Spirit, man. And he said, I don't know. I'm a cradle Catholic. I know about God. I know about Jesus, but I don't know anything about the Holy Spirit. So he starts to ask me, and I start to tell him. And then all of a sudden, all that guilt, right, comes over me. And I say, you know what, Jay, I have no business telling you this. There's a priest over there. Go see him. No, man. You were explaining it like I was following what you were saying. Jay, I'm not your guy. I can't do this. All right. But why? Like, you can help me. I'm not your guy. Like, seriously, I'm not doing this. Like, I don't know. I don't deserve to do this. And he said, please just let me take you to dinner one night this week. And if it's the people around that you're worried about, let just you and me go to dinner. So he browbeat me into going. And I was like, yeah, I'll meet you Tuesday. We go to a pizza place that Tuesday night. But that Sunday after it, that next day, I'm sitting there going, what have I got myself into? What am I going to say to this guy? Who am I to talk to anybody about Christ or anything? And so I start to open my Bible, and before I know it, I got a legal pad 3 pages deep with everything on the Holy Spirit from the breath over the earth in Genesis to Pentecost and beyond. And when I go meet him Tuesday night, we sit down. I look like a lawyer. I got books everywhere. I got legal pads everywhere. I got a beer sitting there. I'm like, let's go, for him. And so he sits down and we start talking, and I share all this stuff with him, and he goes, man, this is amazing. Why aren't you leading a Bible study? Why aren't you leading a men's group? And I go, dude, out of the question. Like, I just can't do that. Why? You're good at this. What you just did for me, so many men would enjoy. And I said, Jay, not your guy. I can't do it. Again. He keeps asking. And finally I said, Jay, I can't. I just can't. If I do this, then there's things people are going to find out about me. He said, what could be that bad? And I said, you know what? To hell with it, blah. And I told him everything I just told you. And I expected him to get up, knock the books off the table and go, geez, I can't believe you. And he just looked at me. He goes, that's amazing. You should start a men's group. And I went, did you not just hear what I said? Like, I did a lot of cocaine. I was a terrible husband and father. I was addicted to porn. Like, what in that? There's no resume things in there that say this guy is the guy we're looking for a men's leader, and he says, John, like, seriously, we know a lot of guys will call them together. You do what you just did, and we'll see what the Lord does. And I was like, man, you're nuts. Like, this affects my wife and my kids and everybody else. But he convinced me, and we invited all these guys in our parish. And we had about 30 guys. And the night came, it was a week later, it was a Wednesday night. It was dark. It was the time of year where it was dark outside, really early. I think the meeting started at like 5:30. And Jay was going to bring beer, so it kept the men at least there long enough to listen. And then I was going to get up and do my thing. So we walk up. I go up to the family room, and I walk up. There's no Jay. There's no beer, and there's all these guys that look very disgruntled that they're sitting around this table and have no idea why they're there. We didn't tell them. So I reach for the door, and Matthew, again, like this voice comes over me, and it was the devil, man. It was the devil. He was saying, if you open this door, you're going to lose everything. If you open this door, you're going to expose who you really are. You're going to lose your friends, the guys you've made in your life. Everything's going to change. It's comfortable in here. Stay where you are. Out there, you're going to have to be different. Think about it. Your kids might get kicked out of this school. You might be kicked out of this parish. Think about the embarrassment it's going to have for your wife. How embarrassed she's going to be for people to know that she stayed with somebody like you. You know, all of that just poured on me. I let go of the door. I turned around to leave, and I got about 3 steps, and it was like Ezekiel, right? God in the whisper, not the earthquake or the storm. I just heard this quiet voice that said, John, you promised me you were going to be different. You promised me you were going to be what I needed you to be. So I turn around, I open the door, and I walk in there, and all these guys are like, what are we doing here, man? Like, nobody's told us, and why are we here on a Wednesday night? Jay shows up like 2 minutes before the bell, you know, and comes in and throws down the beer and sits down. And I said, guys, here's the thing. We got a great men's club here. We raise money for the kids' jerseys. We do all of that. But the only time we ever talk about God is when the priest is there and prays before the meals. And that's it. And most of the time, the priest doesn't make it. Let me tell you the danger of that in your life. And I just went blah. And I told all those men that half of them I never met in my life, some of them I was friends with, everything I just told you. I was crying, sobbing, bawling. And I said at the end, I go, look, I know you didn't know why you were here. There's a lot of bewildered looks on your faces right now. If you want to go, there's no hard feelings. I get it. But if you want to stay, I think we need to start something for men, some spiritual thing here for men. Don't know what I'm doing, but I think we need to do it. We need to find some help and start something. And I sat down. Well, all of a sudden, Jay, the guy that invited me, stood up next to me. And I thought, you son of a gun, you're going to leave. You're the one that's going to leave. You got me into this mess. And he looks down at me. He looks down at me and he goes, or he looks down at everybody. And when I looked up at him, he was crying. He was sobbing. And he said, you know what? I'm a terrible husband. I'm a terrible father. I care more about money and my job and my work than I do about my kids and my wife because of the way that I spend my time. And he sat down. And the next guy stood up and he said, I'm addicted to porn. And the next guy stood up and he said, I'm an alcoholic. I'm drunk. I Ubered here. I've been in a hotel for 24 hours drinking a case of beer because my wife and I fight. She stays at home. I escape. My work thinks I'm sick. She thinks I'm at work. And the next guy, I'm smoking pot all the time. My wife's going to leave me if I don't quit. Another guy, I'm getting a divorce and none of you who are my friends even know it. All the way around this room, every man stood up and shared something. And Matthew, that was the night that God showed me the power of vulnerability in my life. Right? Like one man standing up and pouring his sins and his transgressions and his mistakes and his failures out had the opposite reaction of what the world tell you it would, right? The world would tell you that becoming vulnerable is weak and it's less masculine and you're susceptible to attack and all of those things. But St. Paul tells us, as you know well, that my power is made perfect in weakness. That's what God tells St. Paul. And St. Paul says, let me boast only of my weaknesses, my hardships, my difficulties, because when I'm weak, I'm strong. I figured out what that phrase meant in my life, and it was so freeing, Matthew. It was like all the times I'd reach for that door in my life, remembering all those nights on the couch where I sat there weeping because I knew that I was killing myself. I knew I was wasting my life. I knew I was a terrible husband and father, and I wanted out of that cell. But every time I tried to open that door, the devil just pushed me right back. He came up and he pushed all those points. People are going to find out about your porn problem. People are going to find out about your drug problem. People are going to think about how much you drink every night. People are going to find out about how you talk to your wife. And I would let go of that door handle. And he does the same thing to every one of us in our lives. Each and every one of us with our sins and our things that we're shoving down in our heart. And that night, when I opened that door, the devil had convinced me that all that waited for me on the other side was pain and torment and loss and all of this stuff and torture. But what happened, what I figured out was all of that was waited for me if I stayed inside that cell. When I walked out that door, there was nothing but the peace, the hope, the love, and the mercy of Jesus Christ. And that night, this men's group was formed. Matthew, we met last night. It's 5 years now, every Wednesday night except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. We've had 13 men become Catholic now. They weren't even Catholic. Protestants walking off the street going, some Catholic guy I work with said, you can be real and authentic here.
That's
And
awesome.
men just started becoming Catholic. Men started becoming the husbands and fathers that God made them to be. I went to Cursillo. A bunch of us, we had 10 guys from our group go to Cursillo. It was the largest number from a church here in Memphis, I think, that they'd ever had. These men started to transform. We started to walk as brothers, and our parish started to change. Now my wife has started a women's group. But so we start to heal over through all this. And I'm asked to be a witness speaker at Men's Morning Spirituality, the same conference that I've been to these years and where these different events happen. People found out about this group and like, what are you doing? They heard my story and said, you got to speak. So I get up in front of 1,000 people, never spoken like that in front of anybody. I won an award at work one time. I might have spoken in front of 200 people and my knees were knocking so loud you could hear them in Canada, and I'm sitting here on the stage and I get up there and John Sablon's following me. He's the main guy and there's all these men. And I got up there and shared my story. And Matthew, when I was done, I knew for the first time in my life what I was supposed to do. Like I told you, I never knew in college. I was never one of those people. When I walked off that stage, it wasn't the euphoria. It wasn't the, wow, people appreciate me or any of that. It was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to share my story. I'm supposed to share my life. I'm supposed to help other men. For some reason, I'm good at this. I don't know why. The Holy Spirit works well through me in this. It's a gift that I have. And so Chris Cope was in the audience there that owns Cardinal Studios, now the Cardinal Agency. He was there promoting Rise. He knew I was a salesperson. He said, man, would you come work for me? Started off part-time, went to full-time, started to travel the country, speaking, telling my story, and then relating it to Rise. Rise had a big impact on my life and on my men's group. And I did that until this past year, until Christmas. In the midst of that, one of the deacons in Memphis who has a show, The Catholic Cafe on EWTN, Deacon Jeff Drzymski, was a friend of mine, and he was in my Cursillo group. And he kept hearing me talk about all these amazing things that were going on with men in our men's group. And one night, we're walking out of this bowling alley where we had our Cursillo group. In this bar in the bowling alley, we figured we'd meet people there that might need Jesus, so we started grouping there. And we went outside, and he stops me, and he says, you need an outlet. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you need an outlet. Like all this stuff you're doing, these men are coming, and the Lord's working these just wonderful things through what you guys are doing. You need an outlet. I want to build you a podcast. I said, man, Deacon Jeff, I don't know anything about that. Who wants to listen to me? And he goes, I'll build it for you. You don't have to know anything, you numbskull. Like, I'll build it. You just show up and talk. And he said, what would you call it? And I said, just a guy on the pew. And he said, where did that come from? That was awful quick. Well, Matthew, in those days when I was going to I still go to daily mass, but in the beginning, when I was in there, I would lecture, so I'd sit right there in front of the ambo. And my 6'8" self would stick out like a sore thumb in front of all these, 5'9" elderly people or 5'4" elderly people behind me. And then after the masses, I would hear the click clock of heels while I was up there praying. And inevitably, I could almost count like 3, 2, 1, and then there'd be a tap on my shoulder. And an older lady or an older gentleman would say, young man, are you in the diaconate? Young man, are you in the seminary? And I'd say, no, I'm just a guy in the pew. I'm just a guy in a pew. So that's where that came from. And we started the podcast 2 years ago while I was working for Cardinal. This past Christmas, they went in a different direction. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I get a phone call from them saying, hey, we're going to have to do something different. You're going to be without a job, at the end of Christmas, end of December. A year ago, in a week or so now, this happened. And my kids were home with the flu, all 3 of them. My wife was home helping with that. I get this phone call and I start tearing up. I'm like, God, I've given you everything I know to give you. I left a 23-year job and 401k and all that. And now here I am with what am I going to do? And I started crying. I guess I'm a crier, it hit me. And my wife comes through the room, carrying like thermometers and all this stuff. And she's like, what's the matter with you? Are you sick too? And I'm like, kind of, but not because of that. And she comes over and she kneels and she says, what's going on? And I said, I just lost my job. Like I told her, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. She goes, John, you've been talking about starting your own ministry. Your podcast is taking off. You've been listening to around the world and stuff now, different places. Like, why don't you just do that? Why don't we start a nonprofit? And I looked at her, I was like, you're crazy. Like, I don't know anything about that. How am I going to do that? She goes, John, maybe God's asking you to do that. And maybe that's why he's freed your life up in this way. My wife is a saint. Like, I get to stand up and tell this story, but there's two heroes, Jesus and her. I'm not one of them. And so we started Pew Ministries, which houses Just a Guy on the Pew. It's a podcast, daily videos that we do. I'm coming out with a guidebook for men that helps lead them through the scriptures and virtues and all those things next year. And then Pew Ministries is the nonprofit that houses it and hopefully other ministries that all want to bring people into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Everyday Catholics that feel like God has forgotten them or that they've done things in their life that God has turned away from them. Matthew, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And that was a long time to say all that, but thank you for listening. I hope no ears are bleeding out there.
No, there's no reason, for me to say anything. I'm enjoying the story as much as everyone else listening to this. And I guess a question that I have that I was thinking about when you were talking is, how many men do you think, I've spoken at a lot of men's conferences. When you stand up there and you're looking at the crowd in front of you, and you're like, how many guys' lives are broken in this same way? How many of them were drug into this conference or whatever? That's where the power, I think, of your story is, because, man, it's like, I'm sure there are people who had crazier situations, right? But if God can transform your life, whose life can he not transform?
Yeah. And that's what I try to tell men. It gives me a unique place, because guys will say, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that, because you can do it. I was in a place where there was multiple times in my life where I thought about taking my life. Not only was I addicted to drugs, I had a porn problem. There was all kind of stuff. And God used me. I mean, look biblically at all the people he used, right? I mean, he used all kind of people that it didn't make sense for him to use. Like, why would you choose those guys? But he chose the broken, right? He chose the ones that needed healing. He chose the ones that needed him the most. And then they went on to do beautiful things.
And if you're sitting here, and my guess is that there's someone around the world, hopefully a lot, who are listening to this and thinking, what do I do? I mean, if your story has spoken to their heart, what would you say to them right now?
Well, I would tell you that, vulnerability is a huge thing that we need in our lives. And that's the prison cell of addiction. Like, there were so many times I wanted to tell people, I wanted to reach out, I wanted to be honest. And I just was so afraid of people leaving me, judging me, losing everything. And it's like that cell I talked about earlier. The devil wants to keep you there. And the way you get out of that is by being vulnerable. And I always tell people there's 3 places you need to be vulnerable. First of all, you have to come to grips with what's going on in your life. You have to be vulnerable with yourself, right? Because it's so easy. There were so many nights where I'd say, I got to stop. Like, I'm going to ruin everything. At some point, this rug's getting pulled out from under me. Whether I do it or something else happens, I can't keep this up, right? I'm either going to die or I'm going to be found out or something. But the bad part about the addiction is it always convinces you, oh no, you're fine, man. Other people live this way, and you convince yourself of that something will eventually happen. So you have to just come to grips with it and go, you know what? I got a problem. I got an issue in my life. I don't care if it's drugs or the way you talk to your wife or anything in your life. You have to admit to yourself, I got an issue and I need to be spiritually mature enough to deal with it, right? To say, I'm going to be different. I mean, that's what true repentance really is, right? It's like when I say, I no longer want to offend God, myself, anyone else in my life. I want to turn from this behavior and live a different way. So you have to come to that moment and then make the decision to go do that. So that's the second thing, to become vulnerable with God. I always tell people, you got to take it to the confessional and you got to mean it. You got to ask for Christ, help me with this, right? I can't carry this. That's why Jesus says, like, I want to bear that yoke with you, right? A yoke has 2 places. I want to carry that burden with you. So you give it to him, you let him, you surrender it to him. You admit it, you apologize, you say you're sorry, and you leave out of there with that repentance. So you become vulnerable with yourself and with God. And then you have to become vulnerable with others in your life. I would not be the man I am right now if it weren't for those men in that group. They tell me all the time, John, your talks, John, what you do, the nights you've let me call you and you've talked to me. They tell me all that. And every single time I go, no, like, you don't know what you've done for me. like the support you've given me, the belief you've given me, the friends you've been to me in my life, the friends I never had. Like, you think this is a one-sided deal, but it is not. If anything, it is way more received from you than it is me giving anything. And so you got to have those people in your life to be vulnerable with. And when you do, you're fortifying yourself. You've reconciled with the Father, and now you have people around you that are going to shoulder with you in this battle every day. That's how you do it. You put it all on the table.
Yeah, I'd also say that there are probably guys listening going, man, I mean, he was rock bottom. My life isn't that bad, so I'm doing okay. That's a trap as well.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
that in some ways it's a bigger trap when you sit back and you make comparisons of your life to other people's lives. You're like, well, at least I'm not doing what that guy did or what that girl did, and so I'm doing okay. No, we're all sinful. We are all broken, and we all need the grace of Jesus Christ, and we all have to be vulnerable with the things that are in our lives that are keeping us from just living in the grace of Jesus and being transformed in him.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Matthew. It's a prison, and you're the one that holds the key. I mean, that's the thing. You're the one that holds the key. What I love about that cell imagery is when the devil comes back now and he wants to poke those same places, your porn problem, your drug problem, your whatever. Now you basically are saying, yeah, it's okay. I've already told him. You have no power over me anymore. Everyone knows. There's no dark secrets for you to hold over my head, right? That's what vulnerable means. The root word is vulnus, which means wound. It literally means wound. And we try to wrap up that wound thinking it's going to heal, but all you're doing is letting it fester. You got to pull back that scab, expose that wound to God and others, and let the divine healer take care of it, what you can't take care of yourself. And that's what you're doing when you come out and you say, I want to take control of my life, and I surrender, and I trust in God to help me. There's no way in my life I would have my family, I would be in the situation that I'm in now if it wasn't for Jesus Christ, if it wasn't for his love and his mercy and his healing graces.
No, that's fantastic. And, speaking of daily mass, I'm going to have to wrap this up because I got to go to daily mass very shortly.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to take so long.
No, this is fantastic. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to be impacted by this. And, you mentioned it already, but if you would, again, just mention where it is that people can find you now and what you're doing.
Sure. So just to get on the pew.com is our main website. You can listen to all the podcasts there. You can listen to the daily reflection videos. I've started doing interviews now. Matthew, you're going to come on hopefully in a couple of weeks on my show. I get to interview you, and then we also have patron stuff there. If you ever want to support the ministry, you could do that there as well. But yeah, you can find the podcast on it or any podcast platform out there.
Well, it's fantastic, and I'd encourage people to support your work. And thank you for being vulnerable. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
And man, may the Lord empower all you're doing, and may lives be transformed. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And hopefully we can share a stage one day.
Well, that would be fantastic. I look forward to it.
All right.
God bless
Thank you, Matthew. God bless.